Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I'm going to share my conversation that I had with Karl Weinmeister, who leads the Google Product DevRel team. We talked about AI agents, their role in AI coding assistants, and the ever evolving role of developers in this new paradigm. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm going to see you on the other side. Welcome, and thanks a lot for giving me the time to sit down with you.
Mohammed, it's great to be here. It's been a fantastic week here in IO. And of course, the weather's been fantastic in California, being outside at IO, and really happy to meet with you today.
Uh, IO was exciting. I think this is probably the biggest IO you guys had.
Yes, it was huge. It was a lot of announcements, a lot of great talks. Yeah, it's growing every year.
So one of the reason I wanted to talk to folks from the cloud was to see how Google sees these new innovations and how developers can use them.
Well, one thing that's interesting is that agents are sort of everywhere. So if you remember at Next, that 80K was front and center. We talked about agents, and this time you can think about agents really being woven in. We didn't, necessarily discuss it the same direct way, but it was really integrated into everything we were doing. Um, and really there was so much going on that there's blog posts like 100 things that were at IO, that just a lot of things going on. Even the 80K was released this week, so we had our first Java 80K, our agent development kit, as well as the Python turning 1.0. So a lot of things continuing to evolve past in 1 month since we had Next. Amazing evolution in the last,
and I especially want to touch on the agent part. I think at Next, there was a counter which was counting the number of time agent was mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Before that, I think there were counters when AI was mentioned, right? But it seems like now we are at a stage in which we're really moving to productionizing agents or AI. So a lot of talks were about products rather than like agents themselves.
Right.
Right. So how do you think, like from Google's perspective, agents are ready so that developers can actually build scalable products on top of them?
I believe so. I've had my hands on agents, sort of since the beginning, and that hasn't been that long. And I look at it as this evolution of there was a focus on models, and then you heard about AI systems. This idea that a model by itself is not enough to um, build out everything that's needed, right? You need pre-processing, post-processing, systems thinking and applying many pieces together to solve a problem. And with the evolution of the agent development kits from Google and open source and all over the place, I think we've learned from the beginning, when LLMs first came out, there were frameworks that were general purpose, sort of abstractions that would help with how do you, send a prompt to a model, how do you get a response back, and adding support for different use cases. Now, when 80Ks came out, it was really about solving a specific thing, right? It was about, we really understood those constructs that were needed, like let's start with what is an agent, right? It's, it's got a planner, a brain, it's got a set of tools that can do things outside of that core, LLM capability. It's got, some shared memory and context for calling the different tools. And what we've really done is just said, hey, let's give folks a set of classes and constructs that makes it super easy. So you don't really have to invent all that infrastructure yourself. You just literally say, what are the instructions? What is my tool set? And you're good to go. And we're seeing a lot of customers and developers out there saying, hey, we've tried implementing this and it's just intuitive and it's easy. One of the great things I like about it so far is the user interface, the dev UI makes it, super fast to just try out some code, see it locally or host it in Vertex AI Engine or Cloud Run, you can actually, see the conversation, immediately have a chat interface, see what tools are being called,
Mm-hmm.
get access to the sessions. So that's so far what I've heard is a great addition, is that sort of a nice intuitive API combined with a really nice user interface right out of the box.
Okay, okay. And I think like when you're building with agents, like the way you describe some tools like tracing, debugging, it's a excuse me, critical component, right? So should we expect more tools from Google around those?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and those are some of the, you're touching on some of the challenges of agents,
Yeah.
and one of the main differences in the approach is there's non-determinism, or in other words, in traditional programming, you say, here's the set of steps, and it's always going to happen that same way.
Mm-hmm.
With an agentic approach, you have to be comfortable with there's some ambiguity about how do we get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
We provide a set of tools, and we trust the LLM to make the right decisions and get there. And what's the great part about that is um, the versatility that gives you, because
Mm-hmm.
it's able to solve broader, fuzzier problems than a traditional programming style where you've got to know all of the different edge cases in advance.
Yeah.
And you might, if you recall, if you're at Next, we did that customer service demo, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
we talked about a customer calling in with a huge discount that they wanted. And
Yeah.
instead of just a simple rules-based system that might have just, rejected the request, there was kind of a scenario around, well, let's try to work with the user, let's get some approvals, or is human in the loop, and really showing the power of agents being able to solve the complexity of real world problems and human interactions better. So, it's like everything, there's trade-offs, and there's, want to use the right tool for the right job. But that's where I see with agents the opportunity being the breadth and openness of different use cases it can
Mm-hmm.
cover. But that also means, the challenge is being able to debug and know, what is going on at each step of the way.
Yeah.
One, other opportunity in front of us too are evaluation, right?
Yeah. That's a critical component.
Yeah, because we are, making great strides as an industry in terms of evaluating models themselves and the
Mm-hmm.
outputs and coherence and all these metrics that have been around for some time and continue to evolve. And when it comes to agents, there's just new ways to look at the problem, like
Yeah.
um, analyzing the selection of tools that were called. Was the trajectory correct? Were there tools that should have been called? But
Mm-hmm.
that's really the tip of the iceberg if you think about
Yeah.
it, calling the right tools. So we're trying to figure out and improve and innovate on really getting a better handle on how well is this agent doing? How well is it solving the problem?
Yeah, and those are very important points. How do developer use these systems, right? So we have seen there are a whole bunch of code assistant tools, right? And I think it's becoming an important part of everybody's workflows. How do you uh, foresee how this new paradigm is going to evolve? Like we have heard about vibe coding, right?
Right.
So like as a developer, where do you see this is going to go?
Yeah, it's hard to predict. I don't have a crystal ball. I can share, some of my experiences, what's worked and hasn't for me. Um, I think with vibe coding, sometimes it will really accelerate things, but sometimes you can go off the rails. It
Yeah.
can provide suggestions that, you know, compound on each other, where there's potentially extra code that gets added to the solution that you might
Mm-hmm.
need to clean up a little bit. But vibe coding, there was somebody, a pundit or a tweet, I don't recall exactly where it came from. They said, hey, I've looked at the amount of vibe coding that was optimal, and it was about 40 to 50%. And I kind of thought that was interesting, that vibe coding absolutely has a place and it can significantly speed things up. But there's a place sometimes to say, all right, let's bring my expert knowledge into the problem I'm trying to solve, and let me step in with my own knowledge
Yeah.
to nudge the LM into the right answer and kind of get things back on track. So I think it's just a great metaphor for that assistant view where, the agent isn't solving the problem necessarily always, that you've got to combine that human element in it as well. So, and that's sort of that code assistant perspective. um, what you saw at IO was, the introduction of Jules, which is really cool. I've demoed it, I've tried it. One of the things I tried doing with it was, um, like, I mean, as boring as this may sound, like adding unit tests to an application or upgrading dependency. So if you didn't see the announcements about Jules, JULES, recommend checking it out. It's a totally agentic end-to-end approach to solving problems where you just chat with it, and it provides an answer, but actually starts up a cloud virtual machine and tests it, really creates a robust answer, and then goes as far as creating a pull request on GitHub and a branch for you, and then like it's really everything ready made. And what's kind of super cool about that is it's just a different way of interacting with the system where you just say what you need, and it just completes the task from end to end.
Yeah, I actually coded that in one of my videos. And the thing that I liked about it was there is a human in the loop component, right?
Yeah.
So you give the specs, the asynchronous agent is going to go implement it, but then you as a human review it, right? Before
100%.
merging it. And I feel like that's more for serious software developers, especially like with big projects, right?
That's right. Yeah. So, and it's the way I look at it is, it's maybe you might call it a delegate pattern versus a peer pattern.
Yeah.
So when I say delegate, I mean you take a slice of your work and you just say, hey, please help me, just go for it. Again, you're going to verify at the end, but you simply say what needs to be done and it gets it done. The delegate, that's where a Jules style will make a lot of sense. Then there's that peer approach, right, where you're in the weeds, you're working on things together. You need to get a little more granular in the code that you're working with. And there's often a place for them both to be working together, right? So, I've personally run into where, I have Jules perform the task end to end. It puts the code into a branch, and then I switch over to VS Code, and I've got something like Gemini Code Assist where I'm working with that. Do a get check out of that branch, and I see the changes, and maybe I customize it a little bit, and that's where that sort of human in the loop and the other programming style comes in.
Okay, so I would assume like it's going to be in near future still more collaborative approach rather than AI taking all the coding tasks.
I think so. I mean, I think certainly, like if we think of a spectrum of having to implement everything yourself versus specifying what needs to be done, defining the requirements, designing the system, and then the implementation sort of gets abstracted away. I think we're moving a little more towards that where this touches on the skills we need in the future is being able to design and architect and really clarify what you need. And that's a core skill set. That's, as a developer, you take on those product manager skills, product owner skills as well in what you're doing. And it's a natural evolution of programming years ago where, I'm a little rusty when it comes to deeper computer architecture. You used to, when you're working with C or languages lower level, even back when there was assembly, you're dealing with registers, where you just keep moving up as an industry in the level of abstraction. It's always good to know how things work under the hood, but having a way to automate some of the things that get in the way of us going from an idea to implementation. It's basically speeding up that loop, right? So I have an idea, I want to test it, I want to verify it, And what's one of the things that I've seen is pretty cool, even this notion of what if I could create multiple solutions, multiple variants of the solution with an LLM, and then pick which one I want, and then sort of then have more variants of that. This just idea of boosting our creativity as well, not just sort of going down that straight line, but kind of augmenting our thinking and giving us little mutations on our ideas.
With this evolution, how do you think, apart from how human interacts with, say, programming languages, how would platforms themselves evolve?
One of the mantras you've heard in Google Cloud is this notion of, when you look at the software development lifecycle, first there was shifting left, that was basically bringing more responsibility early in the development process, thinking about, test-driven development as an example, not doing it at the very end, but thinking about tests up front. And then that evolved to shifting down, which meant shifting that responsibility into the platform layer. So as we look at, let's say with the ADK and observability capabilities, debugging capabilities, we'll start to see more of those management capabilities handled by the platform. And you already see some of the announcements that you saw at I/O, and some of the new capabilities you have on Google Cloud are like Database Center, where you can see across all of your databases. You have Cloud Assist, where you can see correlation across logs and other parts of your system to identify what's going on. So I think the hyperscalers can bring to bear all the different services across complex applications and bring that information together. And of course, LLMs have a part to play in that. I mean, they're so good at bringing together and connecting these, needle in a haystack type of information together.
I want to talk about some of the tools and some of the philosophies. I think that there is kind of a sense that Google is building multiple different tools which do pretty much the same thing. Like an example would be AI Studio have Applet, Firebase Studio is a very similar concept, like in terms of like end-to-end development, right? You guys release Jules, right? So what's kind of the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, and certainly a fair question. And we are in an era of innovation, right? We're moving quickly. We're solving all kinds of problems, being very creative. I would say this: it's not necessarily about tools that compete with each other. It's about finding the right tool for the job and building tools that are suited well for a particular ecosystem. So you saw Firebase Studio, right, where you have a great all-inclusive environment that is fully end-to-end, cloud, full stack, but with this particular strength in mobile and web application development, direct integration to Firestore for data and so on and so forth. And then you have AI Studio that's got that fantastic model-centric experience, right, where you're working with, asking questions, building things directly there. Then for, say, a VS Code or JetBrains developer, you've got Gemini Code Assist directly in the IDE. I think Jules, it is a evolving technology. We'll see how that evolves. But right now, I think of it as meeting developers where they're at, creating technology that's suited for those ecosystems. So one of the things we saw, for example, with the ADK was we released a ADK for Java because we saw a big need where there were enterprise developers. So 30% of professional developers are using Java. It's still super popular language in the enterprise, and a Spring, ecosystem focused ADK is meeting developers where they need versus having them learn Python and just creating extra hoops for them. So that's the philosophy. And, to be fair, we're also looking at how do all these things come together and converge. So I don't know if you saw any of the announcements around Cloud Run related to AI Studio, but there's some really interesting capabilities around being able to take code and directly deploy it into Cloud Run, or things like, you're experimenting with Gemma and you want to actually deploy it to a Cloud Run endpoint. So these are examples of capabilities where we're bringing them together, still having an endpoint or a surface that's meeting devs where they're at, but trying to make it easy to navigate and move to the as you evolve your journey, or you have multiple teams hitting things from different angles in Google Cloud. So I think everybody can benefit. Again, just that notion of we have fantastic tools, we have AI that can solve problems for us.
Do you see the role of developer evolving? Like, for example, right now we have a product manager, right, and like a separate QA team, right? Do you think as a developer you will need to have those skills as well?
I think you will need to communication is more important than ever, working with all kinds of disciplines. And I think the role will become more fluid. I think that, I just talked about with requirements and design, this notion of one of the things I talked at next about was prototyping completely changing in the era of AI, where you have an idea and you might skip right ahead to code, and not necessarily go through formal designs and mocks and high fidelity, low fidelity, going through all of that. Let's just see what it looks like. Get some quick feedback. Cool. Are we on the right track? Yes, no. Okay, let me do another one. We're accelerating that. So that does change the game a little bit, and it expands the developer skill set. But I think, again, it also, I would say, same applies if you're a product manager. We're seeing product managers that are maybe, say new to coding, and they're building full MVPs with Gemini and creating businesses over a weekend. And designers that are, going from Figma to code and building all kinds of cool things. So I think across the disciplines, this is just something that I've learned is, generative AI helps you get outside of your comfort zone. It really helps you kind of say, hey, let me stretch myself. I don't know. I'm not formally trained in this technology. Let me give it a shot. Let me see how it'll help me. Let me look some things up. And I think everybody will be doing that. So it's just a little bit of not only learning, but also uh, stretching yourself, trying some new things, having AI give you some guardrails and support.
We're going to end it on that.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Karl.
Absolutely.
Pleasure
Thank
talking
you,
with you.
Ahmed. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.